Welcome to the Magic of Positive Thinking, a podcast hosted by Norb Savannasini, founder of AmericanEagle.com, and writer Al Edwards. Norb, we got brand new microphones, and it's a brand new day. How better can it get?
You know, every day just gets to be better and better. To really thank the good Lord for what He gives us every day. You know, this is a present, it's a gift, and today is a beautiful fall day, and this morning the sky had reds and whites and blues, and with the trees changing. I mean, my God, it's so beautiful. I really feel bad for people that can't appreciate that. I actually feel bad about it, you know, because if you wake up admiring that kind of stuff, it makes your day better. I don't care who you are, where you're at. It just makes your day better.
Well, it all boils down to three words that has been the foundation of our podcast, and it's called familiarity breeds contempt. And we all are victims to that. We all get contemptuous of things we see every day, and we can't let that happen to ourselves.
Yeah, it's very, very true. And you know what's interesting with all the problems there are in the world today, I mean, it's just to the point that the negativity has permeated into just everything. You know, I mean, I keep repeating this. You know, when you watch the news or you listen, and nobody says anything positive. Nobody.
Yeah.
And it's totally ridiculous. And I'm glad we're going to talk about a gentleman today that Al really likes, and I found out some really interesting things about the gentleman. So hopefully this will make your day better.
Yeah. Thank you, Norb. You're right. Because there's so much negativity in the world, we want to talk about a gentleman who actually just passed away back in August. His name was Frank Caprio, and he was a chief municipal judge in Rhode Island, in Providence, Rhode Island. And he's known as the compassionate judge or the caring judge because he actually was a traffic court judge. So these were not matters of murder or anything like that. These were people getting red lights, tickets. And what he always did, he always tried to take into account the person's circumstances in their lives to help them any way he could. He didn't let people go if they were truly responsible for things, but he always looked at the circumstances around their lives. And YouTube is loaded with this show called Caught in Providence, where they filmed his actual real court proceedings for 25 years. And he just died. But the bigger picture about this guy that everyone needs to know about is that his parents were Italian immigrants who came here with nothing. His father was a fruit peddler, similar to those here in Chicago, the old Maxwell Street fruit peddlers from 100+ years ago. His father started that way. His father became a milkman in Rhode Island and was extremely proud of building another chapter of the American story. And if you have never heard of Francesco Caprio, Judge Frank Caprio, I want you to YouTube him right away. And you'll get caught for hours watching this guy. He was a beautiful man, and he did everything with compassion and kindness and wanting to help people.
And, you know, one of the interesting things about this gentleman, that when Al mentioned to me that, you know, he wanted to do the show about this guy, I asked some people, have you ever heard of this? And I didn't find anybody that knew about it. But amazingly enough, you know, I have a cousin in Argentina that I talk to regularly. Now that, you know, these long distance calls are at no cost.
Right.
She likes to talk for about half hour to an hour. So I mentioned to her about, you know, positive things, and she said, well, how about Judge Caprio? And I said, my God, do you know Judge Caprio? She says, oh, yeah.
Wait a minute. She brought it up to you?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I thought you asked her about it.
No. She actually
Wow.
brought it up to me as a total coincidence.
Wow.
And the thing that was amazing, I said, well, is he known down in Argentina? And he says, yeah, he's really well known. And then I found out through YouTube, if you look at the comments, this guy's known all over the world.
Yeah.
Now, this is the saddest part about this, is that here is an American story. You can't have anything more American than a person that came from humble beginnings, comes to this country with nothing, and does something with his life. They never asked for any handouts from the government. They never did anything. Their father was a milkman. And, I thought that Al was going to mention something about his father, but his father, when he was a milkman, he was given an order that if somebody didn't pay over, let's say, a month, he had to cut the milk deliveries. And the father wouldn't do it if there were children in the house.
Right.
And he disobeyed, his boss because he couldn't disobey his heart.
Oh, I love that. That's exactly right.
And sometimes, and I think it transferred to the child who is this judge we're talking about, that the guy listened to, why did you do this? And if the guy had something that he couldn't control beyond his circumstances, which happens to all of us, by the way, he took that into consideration.
Yeah.
And that's, there's something about being human that is not talked about anymore. And, just be human, because that's what makes the difference between us and animals,
Especially in today's world where everything is so humanless with all the technology and all the press 1, press 2, and
yeah. Or everything's Wi-Fi, and
right.
And with all the judges that there are, and you watch TV if you have to, which sometimes I have to. You're just looking about this judge did this, and this judge did that, and this judge did this, and you're thinking, where's the humanity in this thing?
Right.
Where is the logic in this? And it's very, very interesting. So I'm glad you introduced this gentleman. That everybody, obviously, like Al says, you should go to YouTube, and see this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and thank you for the opportunity to do it, because you're right. His father he started as a fruit peddler, which is, some of you may not know, that was very common for a lot of European immigrants here in Chicago. Maxwell Street, which still exists technically in name, but it's nothing like it was years ago. It was down on the west side of the city on Maxwell Street near Taylor Street. And there were all these Jewish and Italian and Polish, all these immigrants who would sell stuff. And his father was named Antonio Caprio Jr. From Italy, was a fruit peddler, and he had an unusual nickname, his father. One day he was in the winter. This is Providence, Rhode Island, so it got very cold, just like it does here in Chicago, right? And his father was peddling fruit one day. It was so cold. He walked into a restaurant to try and get some coffee because literally his face was frozen. And he could barely talk. And he said to the waitress, he said, "I want a tup of toffee, a tup of toffee." And from that moment on, Judge Caprio's father's nickname was Tup of Toffee, or Tup. And he eventually became a milkman, and he wore this is such a great American story. He wore the milkman outfit with the bow tie very proudly. And like you said, if there were children in the home and the family was behind, this was during the Depression. If the family was behind milk, the milk bill, he would reach into his own pocket and help extend the credit, because
when there were children
in the home, when he didn't care about the adults, he said, forget them.
But
when there were children in the home,
themselves.
right, he would not cut off the milk if there were children in the home. And he said to his son, Frank, he said, "If you don't want to do this, what I'm doing right now, dragging bottles of milk up 4 flights of stairs, you better go to college."
Yeah.
And today, of course, I would say you better go become a plumber and electrician, because we need that more today. But back then, you better go to college if you don't want to do this. And that's America right there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I think if you go to college today, you'll start knowing about all these negativities. And actually it becomes almost a detriment.
Yeah. I tell young people today to go into the trades. That's where the money is today.
Yeah, every plumber, and it's kind of funny, because last night I have a gentleman that I know that has a roofing company. And this guy's got a collection of cars that is just beyond belief. And he's a roofer, and he's been a roofer all his life. and I've used them, and actually my daughter used them before me, and I was introduced to them by her. And this guy is a very, very well-to-do guy, and there's nothing wrong with the trades.
Oh.
And by the way, he's one of the most positive, jolly, nice guys you could ever meet, because he hasn't had his mind polluted
Right.
with the stuff that's being promoted today by just about every media there is. So
yeah,
it's something to think about.
For sure. I tell young people all the time, forget, listen, I have a college degree. I'm happy about it. That's fine. But I tell young people all the time, the way to go today is in the trades, because they say out of every five tradesmen that are now either retiring or dying, only 2 of them are being replaced.
Yeah.
And I don't care how advanced computers and the internet and everything is, they won't fix a leaking pipe.
Well, when somebody in the White House sees a leaking pipe, they're not going to call a PhD on nuclear energy to fix it. They're going to call a plumber.
A guy with a wrench.
Yeah. So that's when you really understand the value of a person. And what's interesting is that, when I was a young guy, I had an interesting experience because my father worked for a guy who was a very wealthy man in a small town in Bloomington, Indiana. And he had a lot of friends, very important friends. And sometimes I was invited to some of these lunches as a young boy. And one time he actually went with the president of Indiana University.
Wow.
Who was a guy by the name of Herman Wells, who was very well known internationally. He was a consultant to governments and stuff like that. And I guess I must have been maybe 14, 15 years old. And he asked me, he says, well, what do you like? What do you like to do? And at that time, I was 14 years old. I used to fly model airplanes. I used to be crazy about cars. So I told him, I said, I really like cars, and I work on cars, and I like model airplanes. And this guy who was a PhD, the president of a corporation, and of the university, and he looked at me and says, I don't know anything about anything mechanical, or I don't understand anything. And even at that age, I had this thought, how important is this guy really in nature,
in the world?
Life? Because, if I was in a deserted island, there's a shipwreck and I'm in an island, do I want this guy next to help me, or do I want a guy that really knows how to build stuff,
right,
and use a wrench and a hammer and
right,
stuff, and it doesn't even deserve 10 seconds of thought who you would choose.
Right.
So I've always looked at life like that. What is really important in life? What is really important? I think we all have to reach down deep and figure it out. This guy Caprio, can you imagine how happy this guy must have been going home after he found out that the reason this woman ran a red light is because he had a child that was sick and she had to go to the hospital? And I think that's what makes a human, to do the right thing.
Absolutely. And he tells us, by the way, he wrote a book that's a great book. It's also on Audible that he himself narrated. If you're interested in Audible or get the book, it's called Compassion in the Court. And it's not just a story about the court system. It's a story of his life and how he approached being on the bench. Another story, just died in August, by the way. He died at 88 years old. He tells a story when he first became a judge. His first day in court, his father was in the courtroom with him. And he forgot about his background, and there was a woman there, and Judge Caprio really gave it to her about, this is this fine, and you did this, and here's a fine for that, and whatever. And they got done with the day, and Judge Caprio said to his father, what did you think of my first day? And he said, Frank, why did you treat that woman the way you did? She had a problem and kids, and why did you do that? He said, you're letting this judge thing go to your head. And that changed for the next 38 years. That changed the way he handled his courtroom. He never forgot that. His father said to him, why did you treat that person that way? And he never forgot that. And from that moment on, he was kind and compassionate and understood people.
Wow, I tell you something. I'm always amazed about when Al and I have these talks, and like we've said every show, we never practice or anything.
We probably should start practicing.
Yeah, because I don't know if it'd be any better or any worse. I don't know. But it's interesting because I actually printed something today that I wanted to talk because I was reading this, and it's an article about how the human race and the masses of the public always think of these people that are in power as to having some superior abilities. And we all have responsibilities in life. I've been a husband, a father. I ran companies, and people think that you're really different and you really are special. And I think the only special thing that you can have is just like Caprio had, it's a heart, the human heart.
Yeah.
And this is actually a very interesting thing that I just took this out of the computer today. It's incredible. I just read it today. This is an article talking about the so-called experts. And we all think that just because a person is a senator or a congressman or even a president or a PhD or anything, that they're experts, okay? This is a University of California research psychologist by the name of Philip Tetlock, who analyzed 82,000 predictions made over a 20-year period by 284 widely recognized political experts. In his 2005 book that is titled Experts in Political Judgment, Tetlock found that experts' predictions were only a tiny bit better than random guesses.
Wow.
The equivalent of a chimpanzee throwing darts at a board. Tetlock noted a perversely inverse relationship between indicators of good judgment and the qualities of the media and pundits in politics. In Washington, a reputation for wisdom suffices for a grasp of the facts. Experts achieve prominence thanks to their swagger and bluster, not their foresight. As long as experts err in favor of what's popular, then blunders are speedily expunged.
Wow.
And you know what's really interesting? The Wall Street Journal, like 20, 30 years ago, I used to subscribe to it. I don't anymore. I read it on the internet. But they used to have all these financial experts pick stocks. And they did this for years, by the way. And it's not been published. And then they had a bunch of guys throwing dartboards at the stock market that they published in the Wall Street Journal. And they found that the dartboards, most of the time, if they weren't better, they were equal to the predictions of these experts. So, we're inundated today with these so-called experts that are like 99% negative.
Right.
And if we believe in these polls that I just mentioned, which I deeply believe in, these people aren't experts, ladies and gentlemen. They're basically, what they used to call them, these guys that went around and in the circle, they sold.
Carnival pitchmen?
Carnival pitchmen. That's all they are. And they've gotten all this power of having people believing in them.
Right.
Which is ridiculous. And I got to tell you, I printed another thing which really applies to this, which is really interesting. Now, this is an observation that was done by a scientist, okay? If you catch 100 red fire ants and 100 large black ants, put them in a jar, at first nothing happens. However, if you violently shake the jar and dump it back on the ground, the ants will fight until death. The thing is, the red ants think the black ants are the enemy, and vice versa. When in reality, the real enemy is the person who's shaking the jar.
Wow.
That's exactly what's happening in society today. The real question we need to be asking ourselves is who's shaking the jar.
Wow.
And why. This is I guess it's a lady by the name of Shira Starr made this observation on this things.
Boy, that is interesting.
Yeah. And although there are always exceptions, for the most part, mankind behaves in a manner that is based upon getting along. They might argue with others, but for the most part, he understands that cooperation generally should be the objective because that's in his best interest. But right now, we have too many people shaking the jar.
Wow. I love that.
So you have to realize this when you listen to these people on television, on the media, on movies, or anything. These are carnival people. There's no difference. They're not experts.
Right.
They're no more experts than you or I. And Caprio had the right idea. Look into your heart. Look into your heart. All these people creating, they're shaking the jar and nobody seems to be happy. Everybody's anxious and depressed and everything. So I just thought it.
No, I love that.
Very applicable.
I love that. I think the tendency for anyone, including us, to think for even one moment we're superior or better than anyone has got to be the most silly thing we could ever do, but the most just wrong way to go in life. And I'm always think about the story of your grandmother when you were watching the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II, because this, friends, sums everything up about life that you need to know. Norb, tell that story, please.
Well, we've told it before,
and use the word your grandma.
I never get tired of it, and it's funny because some of the things that stick with you, it's just like today there's a very very ridiculous thing that I think is that supposedly educated people and every modern expert again says that you should spend quality time with your children. Well, I don't think there's anybody that disagrees with that. The problem with that is that people don't realize that you don't decide what that quality time is. The kid decides. And we talked about this before, about my father putting a radio in a car, and I was with him, and he didn't put it in the car, but we spent hours. This was an old car, and it was the first car that had a radio, and it was just amazing. And I remember that like if it was today.
What kind of car was it?
40 Ford.
A 40 Ford.
Ford, yeah.
And he put a radio in it?
Well, he didn't. I mean, he hired somebody. It was a big deal. You had to,
oh, yeah.
Cut the dashboard out and everything.
Was this in Argentina?
Yeah, in Argentina.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was a big deal.
And it was incredible because I remember, leaving the place and they put the radio on, and you had the radio in the car. Oh, my God, it's really, really interesting stuff. I'm glad I lived in that era and experienced that because, today, unluckily, a kid, again, familiarity breeds contempt. That radio's always been there.
Right.
Yeah, so my grandmother, who was probably the greatest person I've ever met in my life, just a really, really incredible lady. We were watching the coronation of Queen Elizabeth. This was 1952, and I was at that time 11 years old, and I made the comment, she must be a really important person. And I always think, why would an 11-year-old kid think that way? And she straightened me out right away. She says, you have to understand one thing. She has to make caca just like you and do every day. And that's something that was such a quality moment for me. Because when you think about the Queen Elizabeth, going to the toilet and doing what she has to do, it kind of makes everything, Trump has to do it.
It evens everything out.
And everybody has to do it, and every senator, every congressman, every mayor of every city, and every PhD, we all got to do it.
It evens everything out.
Yeah. And it just makes you realize that we're all basically people that have to do the things that we have to do to live.
We're all in the same boat.
We're all in the same boat. But there's also this flaw in humanity that I was referring to about having respect for these imaginary people that might be better than you.
Right.
And these people don't exist.
Right.
They exist only because we accept those theories. But just like this woman that, when you think about, she made 82,000, was it? Yeah. She looked 82,000 predictions made by over a 20-year period by 284 widely recognized political experts. These are people that, when you grab a newspaper today, and not too many people grab a newspaper, but even this expert said this expert said that. Well, who decided that this guy or this woman is an expert?
The leading authority.
Who decided this?
Right.
And it goes back to Socrates. If it doesn't pass your own logical intellect, discard it.
Right.
And obviously they killed Socrates because he said such a thing.
That didn't wind up too well for him.
Because the interesting part about these experts, they don't like for you to
challenge them. Yeah.
That they might consider something else or something. So
right. No, and I really believe this in my heart. I live in this little town called Sandwich, as most people know, because I talk about it because it's such a silly name. But some of those, and I know where you have a home in Indiana, is very similar type of people. The most down-to-earth, everyday people seem to be the most skilled and the wisest and just the most pleasant to be around.
Yeah, and there's a thing about, and I think this is international, it's not American. I think American probably was one of the few countries that didn't have this sickness like most countries do, and I think we're acquiring it. But, they look up to these so-called people that are special,
Right.
And they think that these people have some kind of a special knowledge. And wow, that guy, that woman really knows her stuff. Look at that. She went to this university and she got a degree in this. And the person might be a total idiot as far as programming their thermostat.
Exactly.
Or might not even know how to use a remote control, And we have to really cleanse ourselves from these thoughts that are negative thoughts. There's nobody better than you. Nobody. And probably, not much worse than you. And we all have flaws and we're all non-perfect.
Absolutely. There's no doubt. I'll tell you a very quick funny story of this awe I have for people's abilities. So my house is 160 years old, and my plumbing system is the old cast iron plumbing. So the pressure in the house is not so great, the water pressure. I have a friend in where I live, is a plumber. Has been around for a long time. Actually knew Ray Kroc, used to do plumbing for some of the early McDonald's. There was a new type of pipe that came out that looks like garden hose. It's flexible, but it's made for pipes. And I said, my upstairs plumbing, hot water pressure is not good. So I'm thinking, oh my God, he's going to have to break all the walls down and all this other kind of stuff. He took this new type of pipe they have that's flexible. He connected it to my water heater. And I don't know how he went, but he just went up my walls, couldn't see, knew exactly where the pipe for the shower was, and connected it. And I have the best water pressure in the world. Now, if you don't have respect for someone who knows how to do something like that, that is absolutely incredible.
I noticed that you smell a lot cleaner.
I smell a lot better since then,
And which is an advantage. I want to thank the guy.
Scott.
Well, but that's what we're talking about. See, we don't give importance to that man. That man knew how to go through a wall. And of course, he had a guide wire. I mean, and on a house that's quite old, but these people know this. These people have to be respected more than these other so-called experts.
Absolutely.
Judge Scalia, who was a phenomenal mind. He had a lot of common sense as much as judicial expertise. One time I always remember that, and he was in the Supreme Court, which makes it much more powerful, what I'm going to say. He said, people trust the Supreme Court, but I think that if we picked 9 people at random in Kansas City, the judgments would be just as good or bad as what we can produce.
I think you're right.
Which is, don't think of yourself as anything less than somebody else. That's probably the worst thing about the negative. And don't be influenced by these people. Laugh at it. If you really start watching all these ads on all these people in the media and you treat them as comedy, it makes sense.
I love that.
It makes sense.
I love that. I'll end with one story that I just heard that I love. A guy dented his car in the parking lot of the supermarket, and he was all upset about it. He took it to a body shop, and he said, "Oh, God, can you please help me with this huge dent?" The guy said, "Yeah, I can fix that for you. It'd be $250. And the guy said, "Okay, please do it." Norb, the guy comes out with, the body man comes out with a hammer and a piece of 2x4. He gets under the car, opens the hood, and he goes, doom, one hit with the 2x4 with the hammer, and the dent pops out perfect, like it never was there.
Right.
He said, "Okay, that will be $250. And the guy worked about 5 minutes. He said, "You're going to charge me $250 to do that?" And he said, "Sir, no. I charged you $50 for the hammer and the wood. I charged you $150 or $200 because I know how to do it."
Right. And it's true.
It really is true.
It really is.
You got to respect that.
Yeah.
So friends, if you have not heard of Judge Caprio, or if you have, please make his philosophy and his YouTube channel a daily part of your life, because I guarantee you will be better and the world will be better. So I think this was the fastest show ever, Norb.
Yeah, it went really, really fast. And I just want people to remember about the arrogance of the elite, because it's something that permeates humanity from the beginning of time. And it probably has caused more damage to the average person than just about anything you can think of.
So never forget what Norb's grandma told him watching the Queen of England being coronated.
Nothing.
Coronated, not coordinated. She was probably coordinated, but coronated. Norb, thank you, my friend.
Thank you. God bless. Thank you.
Friends, this is Al Edwards for Norb Savannasini, and we hope you enjoyed the show, and we will see you next time. Thank you.